Hi, everyone. This is JaneTaff the Sage
Deanna Vestal, your career catalyst.
with the Lipstick Leadership Legacy podcast. This episode is sponsored by Career Path Development Group and Taff Enterprises. You already know the Lipstick Leadership Legacy podcast is hosted by these two sassy, intelligent, tell it like it is women in the Sacramento, California area. We dish about culture, women in leadership, current events, and any other juicy topics that affect the leadership experience. Our goal really is to entertain, inform, and evoke curiosity. We want to inspire you to have provocative conversations in the workplace, among your friends, and with your loved ones. Let's get into this topic. All right. So, Deanna, this month we are switching topics. Last month, our topic was all about choice. We had an interesting conversation. We experienced some loss and we talked about that, which was so healing for the soul. And in March, we're following it up with something that builds upon the idea of choice, right? And it's habits. And today we are talking about habits that make life worth living. Habits that make life worth living. So, what do you think about that?
I love it. I think it is the natural progression of what we have intended for this year. We started off with mindset, we followed up with choice. Now that we are reading the 7 habits of highly successful people in our community for this month, it makes sense that we would start with how habits do make a life worth living.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right at the very beginning of the book, it talks about being proactive and beginning with the end in mind. So I'm hoping we can dive into that a little bit today, Jane.
Yeah, for sure. And let's go over kind of the layout of our month, right? So this week we'll be covering, okay, we said 7 habits. So we're going to go through a couple every week and double up on the last week. So habits 1 and 2, being proactive and beginning with the end in mind. We'll talk about that today. And next week we'll talk about putting first things first, habit 3, and then thinking win-win, habit 4. That's one of my favorite concepts. Week 3 will be all about seeking first to understand and then be understood. That is one of those principles that I wish all workplaces and maybe home places too would understand this particular habit. And then finally, number 6 is to synergize. Week 4, we're going to have our book discussion of the full book with our group. And then tackle habit 7, sharpen the saw. And for those of you who didn't know, there is a habit 8, and it's a separate book altogether. So we won't talk about that particularly here, but I just want to let you know, for you readers out there, pick up the 8th habit, also by Covey. So yeah, and so what are we looking to do here, Deanna?
Well, it's interesting because every week we have been growing, and as our community grows and we get to hear back and get some feedback and really dialogue with our community about what they find especially juicy about our conversations, we're realizing more and more that we're tapping into the intrinsic motivation of each other as leaders. We are really being vulnerable and bold with our true life experience that goes beyond the success in leadership and really exposes where we are uncomfortable, where we have failed, where we have felt less than, and how we were able to move through that by using our mindset, by leveraging the strength of each other. And you know what else? We are not just executives. We are an intergenerational bunch of folks who are making decisions that are best for us, that are eager to gobble up information, but then create philosophy out of that, make it our own. And we're always looking for this next level leadership experience. It's more than a book, it's more than a lifestyle. It's actually the engagement with each other that we're hearing is so rewarding. And we feel that way at the same time. While we are growing our community, we are really getting so passionate about the experience of these conversations as we share best practices and follow the greats and really examine a life worth living.
Yes, so true. And we were even talking to some other folks today, and we were really talking about how we stand in that middle of someone who's tightly wearing a mask, right? That leader mask that they have to wear at work, and trying to fit their authentic selves and break through the shell of the mask, right? We really invite that authenticity. We invite that exploration. And I really love that about our community. So thank you about that. So let's get back into habits. Let's talk about habits. So let's start off real slow. When we think about habits, what do you think of? What do you think of, Deanna?
Real talk, the first thing that comes to mind are bad habits, things that I do without thinking about them. And I'll be very specific, like waking up and having coffee before having water, and then scrolling on Instagram instead of sitting up and meditating. So yes, when I think about habits, my first thought is, oh, these habits I need to change. And then my immediate follow-up to that sometimes is a sense of accountability around what I'm I'm would prefer to do. And so then those are habits too, though, aren't they, Jay?
Yeah.
What are some of the easy or right off the top of your head habits that come to mind?
It was so funny that you gravitate toward negative habits, and while we're reading the book, there's this difference between shoulds and want tos, right? And we know, at least we say amongst ourselves, don't should on yourself, right? You need to stop shoulding on yourself, and don't let anybody should on you either.
Yes.
And
You should never should on yourself.
and I love that this topic is following choice, because for me, what rolled around in my head was, what choices am I making? And are my habits built by things that are easy or things that are hard? And for me, when I tackle hard things, the habit that I build by persevering, by going through and deciding to do the hard things, really builds deeper habits than the easy things. Like habits we have that are really, you think are easy, are like deciding to put exercise on your daily schedule, right? Those are easy to come up with, not easy to follow through, just easy to come up with. Low-hanging fruit habits, get enough sleep, drink more water. But really, the habits that make a big difference, you and I talk a lot about the habit of self-care versus self-sacrifice. It's choosing to care for myself in a certain moment rather than caring for someone else, because pouring from an empty cup is not a good habit, right? Because that brings on other things that are not healthy for us long term, right? Another one for me that I think has been a lifelong practice is training myself to think in positive ways. And I think that's one of those things where that's why the negative things didn't come up first, because I've really worked hard on this habit of, how do I speak to myself more positively? How do I come up with positive options on looking at a situation versus judging it as negative? Oh, that's too hard, or what have you. How can I look at it in a positive way? How can I speak to myself in a positive way? How can I evoke more positive feelings rather than things of fear, of judgment, of criticism? That's a hard habit. But when you cultivate it, boy, that's a habit that can grow wings, right?
Yes.
Because it pays off benefits and dividends that not only affect the habit keeper, but kind of the habit observers,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
that goes right into the very first point of the book. Habit number one, be proactive. And
Right.
it does lend to that relationship when we make a decision, like what you're talking about, first, just to be more caring, self care, more indulgent on the sweetness, embracing the good that we do have, and then creating habits from that point. That is a habit.
Yeah.
That is being proactive and developing a relationship with ourselves
Yeah.
that lends to more of those kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
You mentioned going from easy to hard, and it made me think about forgiveness as a habit.
Mm-hmm.
And what a treasure. Going into the study of forgiveness is and learning that it's really about me and not about forgiving the other person was one of the toughest lessons. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
And yet, it really was one of those, it was a choice. It was a choice that I wanted in my life so deeply because I initially thought it was because of the love I had for others.
Mm.
But as we make that choice and we start studying the laws of forgiveness and what it does to our bodies and how it changes the way we think, that's being proactive
Mm-hmm.
because you just take a little bit at a time. And as you're dissecting this seemingly very hard obstruction,
Mm.
it becomes a habit and a lifestyle of forgiveness, of considering things from more than one side. And that really does then turn into that warm, loving embrace because we deserve to walk through life without harsh judgments and free to love.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. Learning to forgive for me was big, because when you first forgive that big whatever it is, right? Whatever that big rock in your life is, and you finally forgive and let it go and take it off your shoulders, you feel freer. You feel freer because you've been carrying that around, in your person. And forgiveness is taking the shackles off you first and the other person. Now you're both free of each other, right? The other practice or habit that I really started looking at was assuming positive intent. Like nobody's out to get me. You're not saying anything to criticize me, make me feel bad or this big, or making yourself look better by stepping on me. Assuming positive intent has been one of those things that even in a tense or stressful situation, if I can assume positive intent or you are looking for the best for us in this interaction, I am more open, right? I promote more harmony rather than grumbling, arguing, etc. And I just, that was one of my big ones in the last, I would say, 10 years. Really just assuming that you have good intentions toward me and in this interaction.
Yes. And that's how it goes from easy to hard. We think at first in terms of activity and productivity,
Yeah.
but it does become a little more intense and step worthy when we start talking about the habits of our thoughts, the habits that naturally occur versus us examining the truth of how we're thinking or the benefits of how we're thinking. And you hit the nail on the head. Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have another one that's kind of hard that you really like, ooh, that really changed my life?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Immediately thought, quit taking it personally. I used to have a running mantra because I could recognize that ego creeping up. Like she said, what? And quit taking it personally was the habit for me that I utilized in my mind to then go through. Is it true? Is this even about me?
Yeah.
No, it's not actually. And then what is my where is my insecurity around this that's making me so defensive?
Mm-hmm.
And then how about listening for what is being asked of me and then deciding if I either yes want to or if I'm saying yes because I feel pressured.
Yeah.
And I get to smile about that so big today because it was hard.
Yeah.
And now it is habitual. And now I do see the world differently. And guess what? My friendships show up differently.
Yeah.
And my relationships are much more able to form tight bonds because of how I show up.
Yeah.
That's a habit. And it does initiate with being proactive, but then it becomes much more of habitual relationship building, bonding experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my favorites, um, not taking things personally because it takes into account that the other person had all kinds of experiences till they came to your face. We were talking yesterday, we had a 3 o'clock appointment, right? And I love remembering that each of us had lives before our 3 o'clock appointment, right? Whatever time you got up to whatever time up to 2:59, our appointment time at 3, you lived a whole day before us, right? And however that went will continue to be part of our interaction, whether it be exhaustion or maybe you're agitated or irritated about something, or you're just not concentrating because someone gave you some big news. Big good news and big bad news can be distracting, right? And so it takes into account, not taking things personally, takes into account that that individual had a whole day before you, a whole experience before you, and it's a lot kinder and a lot more real to the true human experience. And I love that it it respects not only the person who needs to stop taking things personally. You become more present versus all the other distractions, when you stop taking things personally. So I love that. So, I mean, we've already gotten into this, right? And we've talked a lot about habit 1 being proactive. How about habit 2? Habit 2 is beginning with the end in mind. Ooh, this one's not always easy. What are your thoughts on it?
That's interesting that you say this one's not always easy. This one seems easier to me than
Oh,
being proactive. And you were just talking about how we show up, and we're working together more and more, aren't we? And I've enjoyed it so much. And when we start off, even though we're working together consistently almost every weekday, the meeting starts off with, how are you? And a little more casual conversation, a little more one-on-one interaction, because we show up with that full day behind us or influencing our vibe, if you will.
yeah.
That to me is the example, one of the examples of starting with the end in mind. We're going to come together and we're going to bond first,
Mm.
and then we will build.
Ooh.
And that has become the habit of our interactions, and our business is growing and our projects are blossoming right before our very eyes, it might seem. And yet it is those habits. It's starting with the end in mind, that we will bond first and then we will build. That is creating that momentum that's almost generating what is required to make our productivity less necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah,
that's one of the benefits about starting with the end in mind. Excuse me, what are you talking about?
yeah, and I think about when you're building a team, not only a partnership like you and I have, but it can go even bigger. In our experiences, we know that if we take a little more time, if we're new to a team, to get to know all the teammate members, we know that that time is an investment in the future activities that we will have with each individual team member. So if I spent time with you in the beginning when I joined the team first, and I made sure I got to know Deanna, and Deanna got to know me, my likes, my, my hopes, my dreams. Now I can find some common things about Deanna that I enjoy as a person before I look at Deanna and ask her for something as a partner or as a position on the team. Now I can actually know you first as a person so that I can work with you better in those positions, right? I've learned that if you skip this part, think about it, because the opposite is also true, and we've also been part of that, or we've initiated that, where we jump on a team and we just get to work. I don't know you from anybody. Now it takes longer to build that trust because I don't know you, you don't know me. We didn't take the time out to get to know one another, discover a fun common thread. Like you and I, Deanna, we know we're moms, we're entrepreneurs, we've been in the work world, we know common people. You know that through conversation, not because we whipped out our CV and said, "All right, let me just give you the rundown of who Jane is." Right? I got to know you. And the getting to know you part is the trust building part, right? So for me, the end is to be productive. And the work is getting to know each other personally. One of my longtime mentors calls that slowing down to speed up, right? Doesn't getting to know someone feel like a slow down or non-productive time, especially for people?
Business.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially in business where, time is money, so they say. But let me tell you, so is sabotage from a coworker who you didn't take time to get to know is also time and money.
That's right.
And it's really, like I said, it's an investment in your future requests, your future ability to tap into their genius zone. If you admit I'm not great at this and you realize someone loves that part of the business activity, now you have an ally versus somebody who's like, well, you're just on your own. I'm going to let you twist in the wind, right? Because no trust was built. For me, beginning with the end in mind is all about building trust.
I really value that. And I wonder what some of our listeners might also consider that to mean. Because as Covey rolls it out, it has so many connotations beginning with the end in mind, right? It has to do with writing goals and being clear about what it is that how will you know that you've reached that goal?
Right.
And so for us, slowing down to speed up, I think culturally and at a time in our history right now, that is a very worthwhile goal that is also proactive.
Yeah.
The world has forced some of us to slow down, but really for many of us, it is still just as busy, if not busier, just transitioned overnight.
Right.
And the requirement to appear normal in the new normal is it comes with a lot of emotions, and those emotions are influencing every single decision that we make. And so if we are willing to say, my goal is to slow down, to speed up, and we give ourselves a certain amount of time to do that, I'll speak for my own self in our conversation. It works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's an inspection too. Is all that busyness productive, truly productive? Is it in your passion area, or are you tapping your weaknesses or challenges more than your strengths, right?
Our commitments more
Yeah,
than our
Yeah, just taking up all this time versus being very focused and narrow on just a few activities. A few focused activities feels so much more successful and gives us so much more benefit than a bunch of nonsensical activities that just keep us busy, right? And I think this pandemic, this working from home as a transition for everyone really stripped away the non-essential. um, we talk about essential workers and non-essential workers. Well, we're all essential, but not all work that we're doing is essential. It's just
I
pushing
agree with
stuff
you.
around.
Yes, and we have this idea of what the mainstream is, as if we were all given the opportunity to slow down or forced to slow down. And some of us really weren't. Some of us actually were immediately impacted with more work because some folks quit right away. We're coming up on the 1 year anniversary, so I remember it well.
Yeah.
And then other people went on disability right away. You got me completely twisted, right? So, then you have some people who have children and then became the CEO or the headmistresses and headmasters of a home school
Yeah.
and did not know how to jump on Zoom or did not know how to keep the young people, especially depending on their age, quiet and engaged online. And so there is this expectation of normalcy that we can handle this change and that we can juggle the responsibilities of getting on Zoom our own selves for work, as well as then establishing a good setup for the young people in our homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes we still had to go to work. I was still in the mainstream when this all happened and had a choice to make,
Yeah.
to stay out there as an essential service
Mm-hmm.
or to quit,
Yeah.
to end it altogether. And, me and the 20 other cars that were on the freeway in the morning, it was bizarre. It
Yes.
came with a feeling.
Yeah.
But that is a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural react. It's natural to react when things change so quickly.
Yes.
And there is a choice, though, to inhale deeply and respond, which
Right.
the book talks a lot about
Yeah.
in being proactive, is reacting rather than responding. And
Mm-hmm.
you were talking a lot about that. You really have a theme about taking responsibility for things like that, like
Mm-hmm.
choice and being responsive rather than reactive.
Yeah.
Dive into that a little. I'm so interested in your take on that section of the book.
Yeah, and really thinking slow enough so that you really know that that's what you want to do. I think there are yes, no, and maybe people, right? There are people who always say yes, no matter what the request is, because they're either people pleasing or fearful of some loss in the relationship or what have you, but they always say yes. And then they end up feeling um, overworked, burnt out, put upon, resentful. And then there are no people. No people, you consider them very standoffish, almost selfish, because their automatic answer is always no. They're very self-protective. They have very defined rules around what they will accept into their lives and what they reject. And then there are maybe people, who for the most part are conditional. It's like, well, maybe, but they're really not taking responsibility for making a decision, because a decision needs to happen, right? For instance, in a family, if you need to make a financial decision, there is no putting it off, because when you put off a financial decision, a decision essentially gets made for you. A bill goes unpaid, somebody gets kicked out of their place, what have you. Financial decisions are things that cannot just be maybe. Maybe I'll deal with it. No, you can't do that. Or you have emotional crisis within the family. You can't sit back and say, well, maybe I'll deal with it when I have some emotional bandwidth. No, you have to get into it. So I really like that this particular this particular show comes on the heels of the philosophy of choice, right? Making choices and thinking, slowing down your thinking so that when you consider any question or possibility coming at you, you bounce it against your capacity, your emotional bandwidth, your mental abilities, your time, right? I'm one of those people. I will tell you, I do have an automatic no bone. Okay, I'm very protective over my time, my mental capacity to engage and things like that, because it's important to me. I was taught, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And when you're unsure, say no. Because isn't it true that when you say yes and you have to back it up and say, well, I can't really do that, it feels bad. But when you say no initially, and then you think about it a little bit and you say, you know, after further consideration, I do have time to do that for you. I can purchase that. But yes to no feels horrible. No to yes is more acceptable. So to circumvent all of that back and forth, I rather slow the whole process down. My go-to phrases are, let me think about that, and let me look at my calendar. Right? And if it really is an unknown for me, let me talk to my husband about that. Or, you know, truly, let me just take that time, because does every decision need to be made right in this moment? Many of us feel a compulsion to make instant decisions, and that's most of the time not necessary, because according to habit 2, if you're not taking the time to think, you can't possibly have the end in mind. You know, because an easy answer would be, I just want to make that person happy. I just want to be seen as accommodating. And it's all very ego driven, because it's all about I want to be seen. I want to make them happy. Or maybe it's fear driven. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be judged as this, that, or the other. And for me, taking time means I'm in control of my life. I get to decide, and I take responsibility for however those decisions shake out. So I know that my decisions will have consequences or impacts on my time, dollars, you know, my schedule. So that's really important to me, to just slow that whole process down.
Yes. Tell us a story. You have got some, if you were sharing that philosophy, I just am hearing some of the stories that you have from your time in teaching and training, I should say, executives,
Yeah.
as well as some of your client scenarios. Not that I know anything personal, but from your own perspective, how the leadership experience is impacted by these 3 different kinds of thinking,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to actions having a consequence, and to us being compulsive, where we are spring into action based on ego or based on this desire to be first, or, you know, these things. And I would love to know, in real life, how that has been, especially now in the last year during COVID. What do you have for us on that?
Really, the biggest one for me, because all of us, or the majority of us, are working from home. We're practically chained to our desk, our chair, and Zoom, just like we are right now. Now, if I worked a traditional job, which I don't, because we own our own businesses, maybe your time feels like it's not your own. But I know you can always suggest, if someone says, hey, let's jump on Zoom and talk this out. You can say, hey, I would love to. Can you send me an email first so I have a general framework? right? Again, slow the process down because someone may be looking to strong arm you into working on their project for them or with them. And do you have the bandwidth for that? To have a few kind of gatekeeping phrases like, give me the framework of that, or tell me a little bit more before I give a commitment. I want to understand it more. Tease out what is the request. Does it fit on your current plate? And maybe you feel like, well, at the workplace, I don't have a lot of power to say no, but you do have the power to tell people what's on your plate. So this is a technique I did teach, and it was, let me show you the plate. So the boss comes to you and they say, I want you to work on this project. Well, earlier that week, they handed you 3 projects. And you can say, as a subordinate, and I have my air quotes up, as someone who's working for someone who's giving you more work, you can say, okay, and I have these 3 things on my plate right now. That 4th thing I would love to do for you. It sounds really interesting. Which one of these can slip on the deadline, switch out to somebody else, but making the plate and its contents exposed? That is a soft negotiation, and people hate negotiating. They think a yes or a no or a maybe is required of them. Maybe should never be said in the business place. It's yes and. Yes and. Yes, I would love to do this. And this is what might suffer. You tell me what is the bigger priority. And can I negotiate a later due date for this thing? And I try to teach everyone that because it is not about position that orders your day or orders your projects. It's negotiation. Everyone has the ability to negotiate. It's just your superior doesn't always remember that they already filled your plate yesterday. Right?
Yes.
They don't remember. It's not that they don't care about you or any of this. It's that they don't remember. And it's your job. It is your job to remind them what's on that might suffer that they already gave you. And that's a negotiation tactic so that with the end that you have in mind is harmony with you and your boss, or maybe you and your teammates, as well as you getting the credit that you deserve for getting your job done on time and being a good team player, right? Nobody wants that team player who grumbles for no reason, except they know the reason is I feel put upon or I'm overwhelmed and nobody's helping me. Well, if nobody knows to help you, if nobody knows not to give you more work, that was your responsibility to say. Right? We have a lot more control than we give ourselves credit for.
And that is where diving into these core tenets of leadership becomes so useful. People can start to apply what you've shared tomorrow.
Yes.
And I love that about conversing with leaders and studying leadership.
Yeah.
With that in mind, both reading and conversing with other leaders, can you tell us a little bit about this month's theme and our activities as a community?
Yeah, absolutely. And you already know our March book discussion selection is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. We feel that it is absolutely foundational, one of the masters and greats in leadership study. And we want to make sure that you put on your calendar Thursday, March 25th at 7 p.m. for our next book discussion. And you can sign up through our meetup community. We're really excited about this book this month.
Yes. And I'm super excited about it and reading it again. This is like 25 years strong.
Yes.
And this book has been pivotal and foundational, like going back when I am at a crossroads or when I am facing a new leadership challenge, there are many times I will come back and because it's the simple. It's the simple, time-tested, always there, almost guaranteed success resource that makes me inspired to continue on. And when we talk about habits, I've shared already that my habits are they're haunting. I'm haunted by my habits sometimes. But having good habits makes life worth living. And I wonder, why do we feel that habits are chasing us, that we're running away from our habits, when good habits are important to a life worth living? And one thing I know for sure is that approaching habits from a good standpoint makes me feel better right away.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of us out there who want to feel better right away, consider what good habits you already have.
Yeah.
Like, I love a good salad, and I really do eat pretty well and enjoy the water. I drink a whole bunch of water, like basic. Yes, it's basic, but it is habitual for me. And immediately I'm like, yeah, I've got some good habits in there. You know, I'm a prayer warrior, and thank goodness for it. But I'm saying that my practice of meditation and, you know, solitude with who I feel is responsible for my creation is a habit, but also an instantaneous lift in spirit. And it brings order.
Yeah.
We feel that having good habits are important to a life worth living because it brings purpose to our daily activities. It changes what we have to do to what we get to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we achieve our goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get all excited about this. The productive people are happy people.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we can either bury ourselves in our productivity. If we're list checkers, by the end of the day, if you've done it all, you can sleep well.
Yeah.
If you're more of a procrastinator and you've done everything, even 7 out of 8 things on your list, you're like, yes. Yeah. And you can have a feeling of control, though, by knowing what your habits are, and then committing to good habits,
right.
Originating action. And these are the kind of conversations that light me up. I could talk about this all day long. And I'm wondering, why do you feel having good habits are important to a life worth living?
Well, it makes everything easier. You know, I mean, some of us we call it going in autopilot, right? We have habits going into our office. Some of us can call them rituals. It eases our brain so that we can leave parts of our brain to think on the hard things. So if you have habits of answering your email certain times of the day, let's say, when that time of the day comes up, you can put down whatever you were working on and kind of go into an autopilot. Okay, I'm going to answer these. And when something else requires your creative brain power, you can kick into, because you haven't had to have a high level of concentration. When you are doing things in a non-habitual way, that takes prefrontal cortex power, you know, rather than used synapses. They're well grooved parts of your brain where, and by the way, good habits and bad habits can be worn well into your brain, but we're talking about good habits. So when you have good habits, your brain is quieter, so that it's kind of in conservation mode. Think about if you've done a commute many, many years in a row, you can almost go into your autopilot to work forget what you were, all the details of going to work, but suddenly you're at work and you're safe and you're fine. Sometimes that scares you because you've been off in la la land, but it left your brain free to work on that which was really important, that required that brain power. And so for me, it requires less of your creative brain, and it reserves for that time you really need to use not only creative thinking, but all of your attention. All of your attention. So habits for me create ease in my brain. It gives me space to think about the things that really need my concentrated focus, whether it be a relationship I'm really working on, especially if the relationship is more difficult. I have brain power for that because the rest of my life is habitual. I don't have to think too hard on that. But really, I mean, that's mainly why good habits are good for me, because it brings ease here in my brain. Because fatigue can happen on many, many levels. And I think most of us are experiencing brain fatigue, thinking and thinking and thinking and using the whole brain power all the time versus creating simple habits for either that busy work or it always disturbs me when people say they're on their phone all the time. I said, "Oh, you have appointments all day?" "No, my phone is just ringing." Well, stop answering your phone during a certain time of your day so you can concentrate. That's a habit of protection so you can be productive, right? Will those people leave a message? Yes. And if it's super important, they'll send you, an email. They'll send an alternate way of communication, right? If it's super duper important. Otherwise, protect yourself, protect your brain activity, your creative boundaries. And I don't think enough people think about that.
I sure appreciate you bringing it to light. And this is the kind of real life information that we share when we get together, and it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
So we get to glean and lean on each other for information, advice, real life stories, and we're working on a couple of things.
Yeah.
So can you share with us some this big announcement? It's a pre-announcement, but it goes right along with how we are sharing and studying and applying these principles in our lives.
Yeah. We have been working on a retreat. We're so excited about it because while our audience hears a lot about our ideas and methodologies and philosophies, oh, you're going to get it full force, and we're going to give you an opportunity to be by yourself and have that mix of being with others and reflection time. But we're targeting that retreat. We're planning probably just a 2-day retreat in May of this year. So be looking out for more information on that. We are happily and creatively putting together an agenda that really satisfies our philosophies of self-care as well as personal development, leadership development for our community members.
Yes, we're going to slow it way, way down so that we can come back refreshed, renewed, and with our habits fully intact.
Yes, yes.
Visually, anyway. We're going to reset the battery, and I'm really looking forward to that. So that will come up with more information as time goes on. I wonder if now is a good time to really talk about the bottom line.
Yeah.
Bring it home for us. What we have been talking a lot tonight. What is the bottom line?
Yeah. The bottom line here is good habits are born from consistently good choices. That's what we're saying, right? Good habits are born from consistently good choices, right? You can't create a habit if you're trying different types of choices. You can only create a habit when you're doing good choices, right? Um, think of something really easy, brushing your teeth. I don't know if you brush your teeth right when you get up or after you have your first meal or after you have your first cup of coffee, but whatever it is, you've stuck to it. For me, I grew up brushing my teeth the second I get up. I brush my teeth the second I get up. That's a habit I've had, and it's worked for me. Now, I haven't found a reason to change it, but that is a good habit that I don't even have to think about. I don't have to get myself out of bed and tell myself, Jane, you better brush those teeth, right? Because it's a good habit that I started very young. And it's a consistently good choice. For us women, another consistently good choice I've made, because I did not have always the most wonderful skin, is to make sure you wash off all that makeup before you go to bed, right?
Every day.
That's a good choice I made over and over again that created a habit. So now, even when I traveled and I'd get in at 1 o'clock in the morning, hit that hotel, you're dead on your feet, and I still cannot lay on my bed without washing my face completely so that I can be refreshed while I sleep. So those good habits, that it sounds simple, but it's not always easy, especially as you get into those deeper personal emotional habits. But it starts with the simple. How about
Yes.
next week, Deanna? Tell us what we can look forward to next week.
I love next week's episode is episode 15. Winners have habits, whiners have chaos.
Ooh. Ooh.
We'll be discussing habits 3 and 4 from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. We do invite our listeners to catch up. You can find this book, of course, on Amazon, Audible, or wherever books are sold. You could probably dust it off from your leadership toolkit, right, in your own library. But you can also tap into the resources that we have on YouTube, or catch up with us, or just follow along.
Yeah.
And on Fridays when we air, we love to invite you all to chat with us and get in on the conversation, or leave a comment and let us know what you're thinking about this discussion. And we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. This is the Lipstick Leadership Legacy Podcast. This is JaneTaff the Sage.
And Deanna Vestal, your career catalyst.
May your lipstick stay fresh and your attitude stay sassy. We'll see you next time.